Hello everybody, this is Andreas, the business coach. So today I'm talking to Jenny Walker, and she's from Driver Belcher, a solicitor firm from Bishop's Waltham and Hedge End. So I wanted to learn more about solicitors and what's the journey and how do you become a solicitor and what keeps you engaged and where do you go with that. So Jenny, thank you very much for talking to me.
It's a pleasure, Andreas.
So just talk me through it. How did you start? Why solicitor?
When I was about 15, I watched a film about Steve Bilko, and when he got put into prison and there was some legal work around that, that kind of made me think I would like to be a lawyer.
That was South Africa, the apartheid and all that,
That's
wasn't it?
right, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I went with 3 friends, and by the end of the film the whole of our row was shuddering because we were all crying so much about what happened at the end. Anyway, and then I did O-levels, A-levels, fluffed my history A-levels so I couldn't go off and do law and philosophy.
Wow.
At Hull. And when I rang to say what my grades were, they said, that's fine, come and do politics and philosophy instead, which I did. And I'm so pleased I did that because it was an amazing subject to study. And I stayed on for an extra year and did a master's, forgetting all about the fact I ever wanted to be a lawyer.
Right.
Came back home, saved up, went travelling.
Yeah.
And then when I was almost just about to get on the plane, I suddenly thought I really need to get myself some sort of proper job.
Right.
And I'd been working for Gosport Housing Department, and I noticed that the carpenters, the electricians, the plumbers, they all had a trade that they could ply anywhere.
Right, yeah.
And so I thought I didn't want to be a carpenter or anything like that, but I wanted to have some sort of trade where I could go and work anywhere.
Right.
And I thought the law is something that you can do that with.
Especially the British law. So there's always, the Britons call it solicitors, the Americans call it lawyers.
Lawyer is a generic term for anyone that practices the law. So you have solicitors who are the guys that, we have our practices in offices. You have barristers who have their practices in what they call chambers.
Right.
Barristers tend to do court work, but they also provide advice. So if we have a tricky matter on and we need a little bit more expertise, then we would go off, in my area of the law at least anyway, we would go off and get an opinion from a barrister.
Right.
And then that's the basis of the advice that you then, with your client and the barrister, work towards.
So are you saying that the barristers are a bit more specialised than you are?
They can be, yes, and also very often it's cheaper to use a barrister to provide that opinion.
Oh, okay.
Because we're normally a bit more expensive on the hourly rate until you get up to the really experienced barristers. But yes.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. So you became a solicitor?
That's right.
And then you thought, okay, so now I want to work for freedom of speech.
Yes, but I didn't end up doing that.
Oh,
I thought when I was going through training, I thought I wanted to be a commercial property lawyer, but that was so dull in practice. It was, and I was training in a firm where it was all about the money, and that I think really it's all about the clients. And so when somebody said that they'd just got a brilliant new client for the firm, and as a reward the partners had given her a new carpet in her office, I was thinking, I'm so working in the wrong place. This really means nothing to me. So I went to Chichester. I worked for a firm in Chichester that had a really strong wills and probate department, and I transferred my training contract to them, and I really loved that area of the law, and it's academic. The law is quite old. It's always still developing, but a lot of the principles of the area of law I practice come from sort of the 1800s, 1900s, and through that you see social history and the history of our country too, and it's really fascinating.
So that's what keeps you engaged towards the kind of the wills, probate, etc., etc.
Absolutely.
And is there any other area that you would be interested in where you think, you know what, I've done that, or is there so much more to learn on a daily basis that you think,
every day is definitely a school day.
Okay, so you learn more about it every day. Is it because there's so many different ways to interpret the law, or is there so many different ways to apply the law?
There's different ways to apply the law. Like the courts interpret the law, so when there's case law that we refer back to for how to deal with a certain situation, the interpretation is what the judges have done. It's our job as a solicitor to apply the law. So a client will come in and they'll want to do a will, so we take their instructions, we apply our legal knowledge to the production of the will for them. When people come in and we're dealing with an estate for them, so they want us to do all the work to administer the estate. We know all of the law behind that, but you will every now and again think, oh, I'm not sure how to deal with that situation. So that's when you go back to the books, and if it's fairly complex, then sometimes that will be the occasion when you instruct a barrister.
Oh, okay, cool. So can you give us an example of where it gets really tricky, when you have maybe a really tricky scenario with clients that have a will, they start fighting over it, and you said before we had the interview that sometimes you need to solicit between two fighting parties that are having an argument over the will, right? Is that correct?
That's right.
So have you got any example that you could share with us, for example, of anything that happened?
I've had one case where the will was quite complex, and the family fell out over that, and that was an exam question of a file to work on, because everything that could come up pretty much did.
Okay.
And it's been a great learning experience, even though I've been doing the job for 17 years.
Yeah.
It did teach me not so much about the law, but on how to manage the file, manage clients' expectations, and also when not to cross the line with the beneficiary. So not to bend over being too helpful or too friendly, maintain the distance that you need to do the job properly.
Yeah. So would you have any advice for anybody who wants to become a solicitor or a lawyer, of what the best route of action is to go down this route?
I think it depends on what kind of solicitor you want to be. If you want to be a corporate or work for the big firms where you will earn a lot of money, you have to accept that you are going to be working really, really hard, and you're not going to have a great work-life balance. And so by the time you want to take your personal life to the next level, if you're going to get married, if you're going to have a family, you need to weigh up how that's going to work in the kind of firm you are. But then having said that, there are lots of people who work in the city that then come out of the city. I mean London when I say the city.
Yes, of course.
They work in the city, and then they come out of the city and work in a smaller firm, and then they can achieve the work-life balance. But I think it's very competitive. So I think people can be put off by it being competitive, but I think if you want to do it, you should just do it. Get on, go out there and achieve it. The
competition between, there's only a limited amount of good practices around, or there's good corporate jobs around, like legal counsel for corporate jobs. Is that where the competitiveness comes from?
It's you have to be different on your application form when you're. What happens is you do a law degree. You do the legal practice course, then you start training to be a solicitor, and that training is within a firm, and that period is called the training contract. They're really hard to get. When I was applying, I sent off 200 letters with CVs.
Wow.
And that was before the internet existed. So I got 2 or 3 interviews and accepted one job.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's really...
That's a lot of writing letters and sending
absolutely. But nowadays, I think, because when I mentor students at Portsmouth University, I understand that when they're applying, it's all online. And some of them do summer schools, that sort of thing, internships. Some people never manage to get a training contract when they've done the legal practice course, so they'll go and work as a paralegal in the hope that will give them a step up to a training contract.
I see. Are there any criteria, any characteristics in a person that make good solicitor or lawyer?
I think in my area, being caring, because we work a lot with the elderly, and it's very easy to think, right, we charge on a time spent basis. So if you're sitting with an elderly client and they're talking, and inside you're thinking, right, this is now costing the firm £39, now 78, and onwards and onwards. You have to be patient and you have to be organised so you can cope with those situations, but you can still get back to the office and still make up the time on other files and still bring in the fees. So caring, kind, listening, and also be good at learning and remembering where you've learnt something new on a file. You know that you can apply that in the future.
And so, okay, that's interesting. Do you Were there any kind of difficulties that you had to overcome during your training and your, you said your training period, your studies? Is there anything that you find or found really difficult?
The studying was hard because the legal practice course, that was kind of lectures, tutorials, afternoon off, and then the next morning what you'd learnt in the lectures you then had to do in the tutorial that day, and on it went. And
that was for 3 years, or?
No, that's a year. That's course,
a year. Okay. Yeah.
What else was hard? I think the thing is as well, people expect you to be some sort of superhuman, like, oh, you're a lawyer, wow, amazing.
Yeah.
You've got to remember that basically it's an office job, that you do have to use your brain, so it's not glamorous. And I think the other thing is you're never going to get everything right the first time, and also it's not a sign of weakness to go and ask questions to find out how to find out stuff you need to know in order to work on the file. And I think a lot of people don't want to ask for the help because they see it as a sign of weakness, but you'll never learn if you don't ask.
That's true. We only learn from failures.
That's right.
First attempt in learning.
Yep.
So, yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah. So, has there been an absolute highlight for you during your career? Is there anything you could look back and go, this was really good?
Yeah, there was. I was dealing with just a random piece of correspondence came in, and the firm I was working at held a document that somebody wanted, and when I looked at it, it looked like this guy, he wanted to transfer some land from an estate into his name as executor, as an administrator, because it was an estate that didn't have a will. And I looked at it and I thought, well, I don't think he's entitled to do that. So I looked at what the land was, how it was held, where it had come from, and what the limitation period was that we had in order to protect the true beneficiary's interest. So we took all of those steps. We didn't let the land be passed to this administrator. We registered the beneficiary's interest in the land at the land registry, so that meant that we'd met the limitation period. Then, because it was an intestacy that started in 1947, we had to instruct genealogists to go and find all of the relatives. And in the meantime, we also had to do an adverse possession claim, or defend an adverse possession claim for land that this estate owned. And the result of that was that we found all the beneficiaries, we protected their interest, and they all had a share in £300,000, which if I hadn't spotted what I had done, it would have fallen foul of the limitation period, and they would have been,
I bet they were very pleased with you.
Yeah, they were. They were, and it was just. But the beauty of that, it wasn't so much that I'd spotted it. It was the fact that I got to see the law as it worked. And then when I was saying earlier about how it's quite historical, we had to go back to 1947 to trace this family. And the other good thing about that is the genealogist that I still use her today, and she's a friend as well as a colleague.
So you made a friendship out of it as well. So a win-win for everybody. Oh, that's good. So when you then look at your career and everything that happened during your career, do you think there's anything that you can pass on to people that are not having a will at the moment, that don't have anything in place? What would you give them? What kind of advice would you give anybody? I mean, it's logical to have a will at some stage.
Yeah, because
why? Why is it so important?
If you don't have a will, then you're not in control of where your assets have eventually passed to. Who they eventually pass to. So if you died without a will, you for example, I expect your estate would probably go to your wife, but it depends on the value of your estate, and if it's over a certain value, then some of your estate would go to your wife and some of it would go to your children. Also, if people aren't married and they own property, then sometimes their share of the property when they die doesn't necessarily go to the co-owner. You might leave somebody high and dry, especially people who are married and have kids. I've dealt with a case where that happened before. The guy died without a will. His children inherited his estate because he wasn't married to their mother. And he owned the house that they lived in. She didn't own the house, so the house is now owned by the kids.
So she walked away with nothing.
And she did. I mean, luckily, as the kids have got older, you know, they're making sure mum's looked after.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it's quite a shock to the system, I guess.
Oh, massively, yeah. And you're already vulnerable because
Yeah.
you've lost somebody.
Absolutely, and then you end up on the street because
Potentially, yeah.
if your kids don't like you, that's it.
Exactly.
Okay. So it is fundamental, but how many people in the UK actually have a will? Do you know?
Well, supposedly 2/3 of people don't have a will.
2/3 of people don't have it? Oh, okay. And what do you think stops people from having that? Is it because people believe it's really expensive to have a will?
I think they think it's expensive. I think and I was one of these people. I was a bit worried that if I signed my will, I'd probably die quite soon after.
Oh, I see, there's that as well, a bit of superstition.
Yeah, but I'm still here. And I think people worry about, it's a lot to think about, which it is, but that's what you go and see the solicitor for.
Yeah.
And also, we do, most solicitors will do a will on a fixed fee basis. It's widely accepted in the legal profession that wills are loss leaders, because if you charge the time that it actually takes to do the will from start to finish, people wouldn't make them.
I see.
And so we do it by going through a questionnaire. We ask all the information that we need to prepare the will, but also some of the questions in the questionnaire flag up areas where more thought needs to be given to your particular situation.
Right.
But no, it's not difficult, really. It's hard for us to do it. You just have to come along and say what you want to do. And a lot of time when I see people, when they get up to leave the room, they always say, that was much easier than we thought it would be.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. So we know that. So a lot of people are reluctant to do it because of superstition and because of fear of costs. But you say that's all nonsense. That's, you know, they should overcome that and really get it done. Because it is important to have a plan available when you pass away, basically. Make sure everything is secure after you've gone. Okay, very good. So is there anything that is on, coming up within your practice that you want to share with the audience? Any events, any kind of special will dates or anything like this?
We do the Countess Mountbatten Make a Will Week, and we do the Naomi House Make a Will Week.
Okay. For charity?
Yes,
these are
for
charitable
charity,
events? Yeah.
That's right. And at Christmas time, we have a stall at the Bishop's Waltham Christmas Fair.
Yeah.
And we also have one at the Hedge End Christmas Fair.
Yeah.
So people can come up and say hi and meet with us. We normally see a lot of our clients at those events, which is lovely.
Yeah.
And we hand out mince pies and hot drinks sometimes.
Okay, so that's where we can find you. Yeah. Okay, great. Super. Well, thank you very much, Jenny. It's been much appreciated.
It's a
talking
pleasure.
about the law and lawyers and solicitors. And if you guys out there don't have a will yet, well, you better get on with it, because you never know. And don't be superstitious and don't be scared of the costs. Thanks a lot. I see you again next week. Bye-bye.